Good evening. I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. I know we talk about taking a moment to be quiet, to have moments of silence. I'm tired of being silent. I'm sick of the silence. I want to scream. This is a moment of glee because America seems to have got it right. And it's also a moment of sadness. It's like we take one step forward and we take two steps back. How are we in this moment of more lives being taken? Like sand in a windstorm. I want to scream. I want to scream through words. That seems to be the only way that I can remain sane. I'm in a writers group here at ASL with Alice Cardini and Steve Albrecht and Jonathan Putman and Susan and Carolyn and so many people. And the reason we write is because we have something to say, is because we have something we need to say to get off our chest, because we have a voice and we want to share it. This is my penultimate innovative conversation. And these conversations are about how do we make the world a better place? Through literature, through words. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Robin, for that wonderful introduction, as always. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Derek Owusu, and thank you, Isabelle Dupuy. We're here. We're here to talk. We're here to scream. We're here to use our voices for what matters to us. Right? I know I started off pretty heavy, but hey, it's heavy out here. It's heavy, right? Langston Hughes wrote that often we need to laugh to keep from crying. So I try to do a lot of laughing. I spend a lot of time laughing. I know you laugh a lot. We hang out a little bit. And you're a laugher. You're a smiler. You're a storyteller. Isabelle has stories, y'all. Trust me, she's got stories. This is her book, Living the Dream. I just went upstairs to the library. Thank you, Karen, for having the book. Karen Field is our upper school librarian, and she introduced me to Isabelle. I don't know if you laugh.
Sometimes.
Sometimes? Yeah. You got a beautiful smile.
Thank you.
That reminds me is Derek's book. So look, y'all, I usually begin by reading a poem, and then I ask you what it means to you. So this is a poem by Derek Walcott, Caribbean poet, and it goes like this. It's called Love After Love. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself, arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. What does that mean to you, Derek?
For me, that kind of just means, accepting who you've always been. But I guess I kind of hear that as it will happen eventually. It's not something that you can rush. Right. It comes at a time, I guess, when you least expect it. When there is actually a life for you to look back on. rather than you kind of rushing to accept yourself, rushing to realize who you are and those kind of things. That reads to me like somebody who has gone through so much and then finally is able to say, okay, so this is who I am.
This is who I am.
This is who I am. But without regret, without saying, I wish I realized this sooner.
Right.
More just, this is when it was supposed to happen.
Right.
Sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. We spend we're often foreign to ourselves. And this life is about us trying to find out who we are. It's about that search.
Yeah.
That search for ourselves. What do you think?
I agree with Derek. I think it's about having something to look back on, so having lived. But I think it's when you come to the point where you realize that perhaps if you can't look at yourself in the mirror and you can't love what you see, how do you expect anyone else to? Mm-hmm. And I think that point comes when indeed you've been through a lot. You are fed up. And finally you realize, okay, the buck has to stop somewhere, and maybe it has to begin actually with me.
Right. Being fed up, that seems to be why how we come to writing. It's just so much in here, and we have to get it out. We got to figure out some way to unload it, to unleash it. How did you come to writing? How did you come to deciding I'm going to write a book?
Well, it's interesting because I was telling this story to someone else actually this morning. After I had my first child, and I had him prematurely with a lot of difficulty, I wanted to start writing. But I felt I had no legitimacy to write. I did not feel qualified to write. I do not have a writing degree, and especially I felt that my identity was too spread for me to claim to know anything really.
What do you mean spread?
I basically was born in New York, moved to Haiti at the age of 6, lived in Haiti my whole childhood and teenagehood. Then I went back to America to university, lived and worked there for the following, 6 years. And then I moved to the UK when I was 28, so already a fully formed adult. But I had my children here, and this is now my home. I even now have a UK passport. And so I felt like I had lived these pieces of my life in these different places, and I couldn't put them all together. And I didn't feel like I had any legitimate claim to any one of these places. So I thought, who am I? I'm a nothing. I'm a piece of all these places, and I never fit in anywhere. So who can I write for? Who will believe what I say? And so I got quite depressed about it. And I was in Miami, where my parents now live, and I went to see a very famous Haitian writer there called Edwidge Denticat.
Yes.
And I said to her, you see, Edwidge, look, you're fortunate because your path has been trodden before. You grew up in Haiti, and then you moved to Brooklyn to a Haitian community, and you can write as a first-generation immigrant from Haiti in Brooklyn. Many have come before you, many will come after you, and you fit in there. And so people can understand your narrative. You already have a mold that you can grow from. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, this is nonsense. She said, you're crazy. She said, you suffer from being a woman and being a black woman. Because she's like, if you were a young white American, educated, you would take a plane to Timbuktu right now if you wanted to, and write from there, and not have any qualms at all about not being legitimate in your, want to write about Nepal or about anywhere.
Right.
So why do you feel like that? And I said, I don't know. I just feel like I've spread my roots too much and I don't feel legitimate. And she said, no. You actually are the future. And what you have to say is quite interesting because you've seen all these different places from your perspective. Go for it. And she's the reason I've been able to write.
Wow.
Yes, because she gave me that permission. She gave me that legitimacy that I did not feel I had. To claim who I was.
Yeah. Wow, that's excellent. Wow. It's the people around us, who we surround ourselves with. are so important to our journey. Derek, you were born here,
Yes.
and your name, Owusu, is that Ghanaian?
Yes.
And so your parents are from Ghana?
Yeah.
What part?
Well, they're both Ashanti,
Ashanti,
so
okay.
Kumasi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. So for you, that reminds me, is your first book?
Yes,
And-
first solo work, yeah.
How did you come to writing?
Well, it was a cumulative journey, So I think, that's why that poem that you just read out for Derek Walcott really resonated with me, because how I came to write that and reading it back was almost like the mirror that Derek talks about. I always wanted to write a book, but I always thought, I'll wait till I'm about 50 when I've got some life experience.
Right.
Then I'll write a book, because I'm young. What do I know what I'm talking about? Do you know what I mean?
I'm young, what do I know?
Yeah.
I'm not from any one place, what do I know? What can I say? This is interesting.
What kind of life experience do I have?
Right.
But I went through some serious mental health troubles, and I ended up in a place called a recovery house, and I just started writing there. I just started writing the book. I guess I started writing what I thought to just be a way of making sense of the situation that I found myself in, rather than okay, I'm writing this and I want to get this published. Do you know what I mean? I was just writing, what almost like an alter ego for myself. What would have to happen? Because I didn't know how. You never know how you end up in a certain place.
Right.
You never know what that one thing is that tips you over the edge.
Right.
I wanted to try and figure out what that was. So I just started writing until I'd completed about half of the book, and then, a publisher said, we want to work with you on this book.
We're going to talk about that publishing thing.
Yeah.
Because that's important. But listen to this, if I may. The distance behind us pulled itself into shapes in motion, something trying to be free, and the night exposing something troublesome. Your words are extremely poetic and lyrical. It's almost as if I'm reading prose poetry. I don't know if that was your intent.
That was my intent.
That was your intent.
Yeah. So I never see myself really as a novelist. So when someone calls me a novelist, I feel like a fraud. Because I see myself as a poet.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And in terms of the novel, is changing. It's changed. It's been changing for a very, very long time. Of course, people would say this is postmodern literature. But the shape of novels is changing, and I think it's changing a lot because we're now not allowing the canon and what a novel is to be defined by, the West.
Exactly.
We're
the past.
Exactly. So there are a lot of novels coming out that would seem fragmented, but that perfectly describes our lives and how we are, how we came to be in particular countries that we're in. Do you know what I mean? I see myself as Black British. My parents see themselves as Ghanaian. Sometimes I see myself as Ghanaian though, and then my mum will correct me and say, no, you're British. You were born here. Do you know what I mean? I brought you here for a reason. But the fragmented identity, of course, will come across in the novel, because before, the canon's been written by, the Western canon especially, been written by people that are so solidified in their identity. They know exactly who they are. Just like you said, if you were a white middle-class male, you'd be able to write anything you want because you're so confident. I know who I am and I know how to write it, and it's linear. It's very linear.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? But I just couldn't write like that. I wasn't able to do that. There's fractures, there's missing pieces. Do you know what I mean? You have to try and turn something so difficult, heartbreaking, raw into poetry.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And that's what I was trying to do.
So what we're talking about is that Derek's novel is, it's it's white space. It looks like traditional narrative prose, but it's poetry. It's prose poetry, if you will. It's hybrid. There are a lot of novels that are being written have been written in the past 10 years that now sort of fit in this hybrid genre. Maybe there's traditional prose, maybe there's verse, maybe there's recipes. There's different ways to approach telling that story. So had you read a lot of books? Had you studied? What was your introduction to the craft of writing?
Yeah, so I started off with the classics. So, as my introduction said, I started reading when I was in uni, and I went to uni late. I went to uni when I was 24, and I started reading the classics, and I didn't know they were classics. I just started reading books. These were books. I thought these authors were alive. I thought Oscar Wilde was still alive, D.H. Lawrence. I didn't know they were deemed as these classic authors. But then after I got through them, I realized there was something missing, and then I moved on to, African-American literature, and I read Invisible Man, and I remember by Ralph Ellison, and I remember thinking, this book, it felt like a blueprint to how to write a novel. Do you know what I'm trying to say? To me, when I read that, now it reads like a novel in verse. It reads like a fractured novel. There's so many missing pieces in that you have to fill in yourself. There's so many different genres, different ways of writing styles that are in that one book. So that was the certain point. But when I thought to myself, after I had my when I was going through the mental breakdown, my mental collapse, and I was reading books, and I thought to myself, if I ever wanted to write about what I'm going through, how could I write it? Because nobody's ever written about it in this way that I thought at the time. But then I read Don't Let Me Be Lonely by Claudia Rankine, and the way she describes, taking her medication and things like that, and I just thought, also, you're allowed to do this.
You're allowed to do it.
You're allowed to do that,
Right.
yeah. So I read that, and I just thought, I love that book so much, and I just thought to myself, and again, her style was very fragmented. I mean, obviously it's marketed and as poetry, but is it a novel? Is it poetry? Is it memoir? Who cares? Do you know what I mean? And I really thought to myself, these are the kind of books that I want to read. Do you know what I mean? And I think subconsciously that's another one of the reasons why I wrote like that.
So, you talk about the emotional and the mental challenges and issues that we have in our lives, and how we need to figure those out. And one of the ways you did that was through writing, to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
My father often said to me or my mother often said, she said, Kwame, you never write poems about me, when she was alive. You never write poems about me. And I said, she said, you're always writing about your father. And I was like, well, writers write about the people who give them grief. We don't write about the people who make us happy. We don't write about the happy things. We're dealing with stuff. And so
That's amazing.
it's true.
It's true
And so,
yeah.
talk about classics. Like, Isabelle is one of my favorite writers, and she's writing a classic book now, a novel now, which I can't talk about, so I won't say anything. But in your writing, I wonder, this is fiction, but I wonder, is there any autobiography in here? Is there any you trying to deal with your grief or your challenges? What was this, writing this book, what did it do for you?
I think my thinking about writing is that it comes from every project begins with one emotion. So that project, like the project I'm doing now, starts with frustration. This one started with shame.
Okay.
Shame and corruption. Those were the two things that drove me to write that book. Because I wrote this book, and I felt at the time when I was writing it, I was trying to explore for myself and for others who would read it and perhaps get something out of it, a sense of how when you don't know and you're young, we all think, and this is where again identity comes in. We don't think that much, or at least in my case, I didn't think that much about identity when I was young. I was running very fast and very hard to be successful. That's what I was interested in. And I didn't think about other things, really. I just wanted to be successful, to make money, to kind of reclaim something that my family had lost. And then I bumped into all these walls, and then I felt like a fool because I was like, how did I not see this coming? How did I not think about this before? How did I think I was going to be such a superwoman? And it was a process then of going backwards and of learning to forgive myself, of learning to understand really where I come from and the obstacles that I didn't even consider that I would have, that I internalized, that I brushed aside, that I And so and I felt ashamed that I had let myself get into a position that I never planned to be in. So for me, that was a lot of the drive behind this one.
Wow.
Was that. So that, yeah, if that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the three of us have something in common in that we are all published by Black British publishers. Isabelle and I are published by Jacaranda. And if I'm correct, that reminds me is published by Stormzy's imprint.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's like a story in and of itself. So I feel like I want to hear that story first. Like, how did that come to be? How did you get this published?
You know, I was working at Penguin Random House at the time.
Okay. What were you doing at Penguin Random House?
Marketing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I used to chill in one of the editors' office, not of Murky Books. Well, I didn't know it was of Murky Books, and we used to talk, you know,
Right.
about hip hop, and you know, he was kind of like a white middle class guy. We used to just talk about hip hop and that kind of thing. He was like, yo, you know, we're doing this thing with Stormzy, we're launching his imprint, you know. And he said to me, you know, I know you've just done Safe, you know, the anthology. What are you working on at the moment? And I said, you know, I'm doing this thing with my brother and as a podcast, and I've been kind of like writing some poetry and this kind of thing. And he was really excited by the idea of the project with my brother, teaching my brother to read, you know, passing on kind of like the ideas of literature and how it can change your life and so forth. And I was just like, I want to do it as a podcast. I was like, I don't want to do this as a book. But you know, when you talk to editors, some editors will hear an idea and they're like, we got to turn this into a book. You know what I mean? We got to turn this into a book. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, I guess so. So he was like, look, go and meet Stormzy's manager, Aquia, and talk to her about this book with your brother. I said, all right, fine. So he gave me her email address. So I emailed her, Aquia, and I said, okay, Aquia, hey, we're going to meet up. This is just a taste of my writing style. So I sent her some of the poetry as well. And the verse that I sent her was kind of, she's from Ghana as well, and was kind of just talking about, you know, British Ghanaian culture, and I was really trying to infuse that into my writing. So we met up, and I said, yeah, so the project with my brother. She was like, yeah, you know, we like the project with your brother, but talk to me about the poetry. Like, I read this, and I really like it. And I was like, oh, well, you know, we're not really here to talk about that. And she was like, no, we're talking about that. Let's talk about that. So we was talking about the poetry and what I was trying to do, what I was trying to achieve with it. And I said, you know, well, the editor at Penguin wants the book with my little brother. And she was like, okay, well, we'll sort that out, don't worry. So a couple of days later, my agent came back and was like, Murky wants to publish the poetry and the book of your brother, but they want to publish the poetry first. I was like, amazing. Yeah, sure, yeah, of course. But I know that if I hadn't have sent, I guess kind of like a sample chapter, where I'm talking about black British Ghanaian culture, where I'm talking about things that a queer could relate to, read and be like, oh, I've never seen this in book form before, these kind of things. I don't think the book would have been published. So I'm really grateful. But, you know, I'm really close with Jacaranda as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was talking to Jacaranda as well, but, you know, in the end it went to Murky, but they've been supportive as well. Like, yes, Derek, we're so happy this book is out there. You know what I mean? That's because that's all they wanted. They were like, we just want the book to be out there. So yeah, it was. You know, I feel like I really got lucky. You know what I mean? Right place, right time.
That's inspiring. So Stormzy's imprint. An imprint is a smaller publishing house within a larger publishing company. So Random House has maybe 100 imprints. And so Penguin Random House had maybe 100 imprints. So Murky Books is Stormzy's imprint that Derek was published under. Jacaranda is a publishing company. They own their publishing company, and they recently signed a distribution deal with Hachette. Hachette is one of the top 4 now largest publishers in the world. They also, I think the more common name that people know is called Little Brown and Company. So Jacaranda published your book, and The owner, Valerie, was a former parent of a child here at ASL.
Oh, really?
Two children.
Two.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of them is the designer now for the covers, and designed this cover.
And designed this cover. An ASL student,
Yes.
a former student, did the book design for Isabelle's book, Living the Dream. Real talk.
What a small world.
Say again? I know.
What a small
I
world.
know. Like, we're all connected.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
You know, we're all connected. So how did you come to be published by Jacaranda?
So I finished this book, and I needed an agent. And so I signed up for a competition where you go and you have, I think, 5 minutes to pitch your book to a few agents around a table. It's like speed dating, but for books. So you go there, you're sweating, you're trying to be calm. You've got your book, you've got your manuscript under your arm, and you go in front of this agent, and they just see people after people, and you basically have 5 minutes to make a pitch for them to want to read the first couple of chapters of your book, and then they'll let you know if they want to take you on or not. So that's what I did, and I was lucky, and I got an agent